So I remember I was born in Iowa, and I had acne at birth, neonatal acne. And of course, you get that from mother's hormones. When you have acne genetic background and you get the hormones, mother's hormones, and you get very oily skin. So you're not born with acne, but a couple of days later you get pustules on the nose, and then it moves over to the cheeks and ends up at the angle of the jaw. So by the time I was 6 months of age, hormones were gone, the acne went away. But when I was 10, I'll never forget, right down the middle, my first little pustule was right there on under the nose. And then, of course, it moved out, and here I am at 16, and then finally at 23, I outgrew it. But when I was like 16, I had the cystic acne. And remember, it's genetic, and it's like a Spanish gene. So where does the gene come from? I was Scottish. How did I get Spanish acne? So, and the Spanish acne is actually the whole Mediterranean area. So you'll see the severe acne from Spain all the way over to Iran, Iraq, and I got some patients now from India. So that whole section has the bad acne. And I talked to a bunch of the Persian doctors who migrated to LA, and when they were practicing in Tehran, 50% of their patients were acne patients, and they had like bad acne. So wherever the Spanish went, they took that acne gene. So like in the Philippines, where they were there for a long time, there's bad acne there. When they went to Mexico, they didn't really conquer all of Mexico. They were really strong in Mexico City, so you'll still see Castilian Spanish with bad acne in Mexico City. But out in the country, they're Indians from China. They have good skin. So the Chinese don't really have that gene. You can force the gene or force bad skin. When we switched the Eskimos from seal meat to potato chips and Pepsis, they got a high sugar diet, and some of them broke out. So we'll talk about that, the diet part. But the question is, how'd this guy from Scotland get his Spanish cystic acne? And Cecilia's laughing because she knows the story. So anyhow, my wife was in Northern England. She pulls her credit card out, and the girl across the counter was also Fulton. So the question is, they started talking, and the story was that the Spanish Armada in 1400 came up the Thames River. There was a big windstorm. It blew them out to sea, and they wrecked on the Isle of Man. And these two brothers got off, the Fultones, got off and went into Scotland, changed their name to Fulton, and that's how I got my Spanish acne. So I don't know if the story is true or not, but it makes a good story. So everybody's got a story. So when I first started out, most of my patients were boys with teenage acne. As my practice matured, and also nowadays, 60% of our patients are women who have flared up. So my story was, it starts at 10, gets worse at 16, comes across the face like a wave, and then you outgrow it at 23. So think of it this way: if you have 10,000 pores on the skin, maybe 1,000 inherited genetically defective, the oil matures here first, these oil glands, so you break out here. Remember when I was 10. It destroys all those pores that are genetically defective, and as more hormones begin to circulate, these pores mature. So here I am at 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 23. So it just wipes out the 1,000 pores that are genetically defective. And then down here, there's no more sebaceous follicles, so it goes away. And sometimes, of course, it'll jump on the chest and back. But that's the evolution. The important thing, especially with the adult women, is they treat ahead of the wave. So if they're have acne here, it's going to be moving. So I try to teach them to treat like a ½ inch ahead of the wave so they can get it stopped. It doesn't really help to go back onto the nose because that's old territory, and whatever happened there is over, and they have to stay ahead of it in order to control it. So also with acne in the adult woman, I got to be a little careful with our skincare program because they don't like to peel too much. And the secret to our success is, one of my estheticians says, exfoliation, exfoliation, exfoliation. So our particular theory is we want it to peel out those acne impactions and get rid of those. Patients don't like to peel, so I have to really convince them that that's really important. The average dermatologist doesn't like his clients to peel, so they'll give him some kind of clindamycin topical ointment, or they'll give him this new Axone, which is anti-inflammatory. It's called Dapsone. We used to use it for leprosy, and then they discovered that maybe it works for acne. I don't think it does, but I'll see patients on Axone and some kind of a topical antibiotic like clindamycin, and it's very expensive. So, you know, they'll spend $120 for the prescription, and it doesn't work. So one of our keystones is benzoyl peroxide, which is not expensive. So the pharmaceutical companies can't make any money on benzoyl peroxide, so they'll add clindamycin to it, or they'll add vitamin A to it, and then they can charge, you know, 150 bucks. And the stock holders are happy, and unfortunately it doesn't work. Patients aren't too happy, but it pays for the sales reps. So our particular approach is, you know, benzoyl peroxide cleanser, vitamin A lotion to peel out the impactions. So then I got to convince acne in adult women, I got to convince the lady that she has to have some peeling. And then we see them usually like in 2 weeks, and they should start to peel. The problem is around the mouth. The turnover of the skin is 28 days. It takes 28 days from the cells at the bottom to come to the top and peel off. That's like adolescent skin. As you get older, it slows down. So it's, let's say it's 28 days when you're 20, and when you're 40, it's like 38 days, and when you're an old guy like me, it's going to take longer. So we want to speed it up and get that adolescent skin back. The problem is around the mouth, the skin is very sensitive. I think of it this way: you have the heart, and the blood flow goes right to the skin right here. So about 10% of the blood comes right up to the brain, and there's good blood flow here. So these cells turn over really quick, which means that they can really get irritated too. So I usually tell my acne in adult women patients not to treat around the mouth, or maybe treat there every other day, or Monday, Friday, or Saturday. Just kind of stay away from this area because it's so sensitive. So we're lucky to have Antoinette today here, who's been with me. How many years have we been together, Antoinette?
13.
Oh, I was going to say 20, but.
Oh.
So how do you handle the adult woman as far as, you know, not peeling too much?
Well, first of all, I tell everybody peel. Just love it.
All right.
Yeah, just that's the way it is. You know, and get it going. Well, you know, because I've learned the products so well, I get them going with those products pretty aggressively, as long as they're not burning up, right? But peeling, drying, you know, and then that kind of subsides when
Right.
you pretty much have them clear, you know. But and like you said, around the mouth, just gentle. This
Right.
area here, the nose, right in this area, you know, just be careful, and you know, in those areas.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I was attending a lecture, one of my first fellows, Phyllis Skolnick, who was like, I think the first woman or the second woman at the University of Miami, and she was my research fellow for a year before she did her residency. But I was sitting with her at one of these meetings, and she said, well, I use a lot of mineral oil. And remember, mineral oil and petrolatum are like moisturizers that don't penetrate into the skin. So you can put mineral oil on, and it won't penetrate in, doesn't aggravate acne. Unfortunately, the industry has given mineral oil and petrolatum a bad name because they can't make any money off of it. So they want to sell you some fancy additive, some kind of a fancy ester. But if you use like Cheeseboro Ponds mineral oil or petrolatum that's been highly refined up in Connecticut, it's perfectly fine, and we use that. So her suggestion was to use that mineral oil around the mouth when it gets too dry. So what we do now is we have a little tube, and maybe we can show them later so you see the little tube in our acne clear complexion kit. We put a little tube of mineral oil and say when it gets too dry, skip around the mouth and put the mineral oil on as a super moisturizer.
Is that something new that you put in the kit?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
So that's new to me too then.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah. That's what was new to me when she talked about it, and so we went out and got mineral oil USP.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
mineral oil USP is just a fancy grade of mineral oil called US Pharmacopoeia grade. You got to be careful of the grades, because if you get really technical grade mineral oil, it may not be really refined very well. So you want to use USP or NF, National Formulary Products. So like our self-emulsifying wax will say NF, which means the national formulary, so we know it's good stuff. So you got to be a little careful with the technical grade. One time I got glycolic acid, and it's expensive. We bought a big drum of glycolic acid, I don't know, $500 or something like that. And I found out that if I buy technical grade, it's $100. So I bought a big drum of technical grade. It was brown color, didn't work. So, you know, it wasn't a good investment. So you want to stay with USP or NF products. But moving ahead, we have acne in the adult woman. So remember now that 80% of my practice now is acne in the adult woman. So we want to really focus on that. Now, let's see if I can make this thing move. So let's see if I can make it go here. Here we go. So now some of this is going to be repeating. So this is my son James with his neonatal acne right here. And I have a series of pictures on him. We should do like a little scientific paper on neonatal acne. But it started here when he was like 10 days of age, and I have pictures showing little pustules right here. And I'm trying to figure out why, you know, they're about 10 days old before to get a flare-up here. And then these pores are the first ones to develop, so it hits these pores, then it moves over here, and then when he's like 4 or 5, 6 months of age, it's at the angle of the jaw. So this little wave as a neonate will be the same wave that happens to him when he's 10. Remember, my first pustule was right here when I was 10, and then it moves out and I became cystic right out here. So there's two things to think about. Why does it flare up after 10 days? And I don't really believe the Corynebacterium acnes, the bacteria, are that important in acne. It's basically genetic. But what I say, and now I got to think about it again, that you're born without any bacteria, and then from mother or from the nursery, you get the Corynebacterium acnes bacillus, and it jumps onto the skin, it lives off the oil, and you know, maybe it takes like 10 days for the Corynebacterium to get here. And they're aggravating factors, they're not the cause of acne, because everybody has Corynebacterium acnes, but only some people who inherited defective pores does the cells sludge up and cause a problem. So when I talk about it, I talk about Corynebacterium acnes, but we're doing a study now where we're looking at all of our patients, and like a third of them have very little bacteria and have bad acne, and a third of them have the bacteria and have the acne. So all the Corynebacterium acnes are aggravating factors. So here I am, you know, at 10 days of age, and then out here. This is like a month or two of age, then angle of the jaw when my son James was like 6 months old. And then of course I got a problem again when I was 16, when I was 10, and then here I am at graduation of high school with my cysts. So that's my Spanish acne with the cysts coming out. And back in those days there wasn't any good treatment. I had, my mother took me to the dermatologist every month, and they had big ultraviolet light Huva lamps, big lamps like this over the table. And so after I would get seen by the doctor and maybe the nurse, they would give you the ultraviolet light under a big hood and burn your skin and cause my first skin cancers. It didn't really work. And then finally that didn't work. And also one doctor put me on a special diet. For 3 months, all I could eat was fried rice and rabbit for 3 months. Still had acne after 3 months. It didn't work. So, and then Mother and I finally found a dermatologist, one old-fashioned dermatologist that had an X-ray machine, and I got 10 treatments of X-ray. And when you measure the X-ray, it's done in Röntgens. So I got 75 Röntgens, or 75 R, which is Röntgens, times 10, so I got 750 X-ray treatments, 750 rads of X-ray. When I was at the University of Pennsylvania, they still had X-ray machines in the dermatology clinic. So the expert in X-ray was Dr. Goldsmith from Germany. So we took like 10 kids and we sham irradiated them. So what we did was we did their back with this X-ray machine, and we put lead on one side, and then we X-rayed the whole back. So one side got treated, the other side was blocked out by the lead and didn't do anything. So ultraviolet light, the X-ray treatments, the special diets. I was on tetracycline for 5 years, didn't do anything other than got me back to the dermatologist. Back in those days, the dermatologist would only write you a prescription for 30 days, which meant every 30 days I had to go back and get another prescription. It was their way of making money, but didn't work. Because if you think about tetracycline, it has to go into the gut, has to get into the blood, has to get into the skin, has to get through the skin to actually be there for the bacteria, the Corynebacterium acnes. And since Corynebacterium acnes is not the cause of acne, just an aggravating factor, didn't do a damn thing. Except a lot of kids get upset stomachs from the tetracycline. You get also resistance, and women get vaginitis, Monilia vaginitis from the tetracycline. Didn't do much. Nowadays we got a special tetracycline called doxycycline, which is oil soluble, which means it gets through the pore better. So we'll use doxycycline. We culture people. I have my little blue box, which Fatima later on will show them a blue box. And we do the cultures and we check the sensitivity to see if they're sensitive to doxycycline and put them on that. But again, doxycycline is a secondary treatment. The most important thing is they do their daily skin care with the benzoyl peroxide scrub, the vitamin A lotion, the benzoyl peroxide gel. That's their key. Then we add the doxycycline if we're not doing well. And also we have a new one now, which is called the Poor Man's Accutane, called Micellized A. And I'm going to have, I can call her Dr. Klinakis here, to tell us about the Micellized A.
Pictures, so I'll show.
All right. So not everybody wants to go on Accutane because it's very expensive. It costs like $700, maybe it costs even more now, $700 last time I checked a couple years ago, for the whole prescription of tetracycline, and for Accutane. And the government got involved because of the birth defects from high-dose Accutane. So you can't get pregnant when you're on it because you have to have an abortion if you get pregnant. And if you have a child, they have severe defects. They have like arm defects, but they also have brain defects. So they recommend an abortion if you get pregnant on Accutane. So we still use it. It's like my last resort if I really have a problem. And patients get better on it, but then half of them flare up again after they're off Accutane. Not usually as bad as the first time, but it will come back in some cases. Micellized A cuts down the oil like Accutane and works pretty well, and it's not expensive. So here I am, but we want to move on. Now some of this is repeat, you know this, but I wanted to go over it again. The age of onset, you know, is like 10 when the hormones begin to circulate. But acne in the adult women, they may not start until later on because their hormone levels aren't so high. So often when they come off of birth control pills, they'll have a male dominant period, or the first trimester of pregnancy will be a male dominant, and their acne will come out. So maybe at 25 or 35, they'll start on the nose and progress all the way over and go through the whole pattern between, let's say, 25 and 35. And they don't outgrow it as predictably as men because it's not so bad, so there's still pores around that are defective. So remember my mother's story, she was still breaking out at 62. So it doesn't follow that curve of starting at 10 versus 16 and not growing at 23. They may have that curve at 25 or 35 from an aggravating factor. So also you inherit the type of inflammation. Some people have whiteheads and blackheads, some people have cysts and the anatomical area. I think that Martha showed the picture of acne on the back of the son and the mother. They have it on the back. Remember, in medicine, there's no rules, and there's always exception to every rule. So even though I say acne starts on the nose, comes across like a wave, there are certain people, like she showed you, that the face is beautiful and hits the back. So there's always exceptions. And here's, of course, my pattern. And then this is the women's pattern. Women mature earlier, so they can start at 8, but they don't have so many hormones, so they'll smolder on. But remember, in medicine, there's no rules. So you'll see actually women who have the same bad pattern as the male, And the flare-ups are not so obvious because they got bad acne. And over here you have the woman, and she went to a Mary Kay cosmetic party and got $70 worth of Mary Kay products and broke out. Nowadays, the big one is the MAC makeup that flares them up. If they go on birth control pills, the first trimester they may flare up because that's male dominant, but then they get better and better. So after 6 months, they're pretty clear. But when they come off, they still have the wave to go. So they'll flare up again and then go through their whole wave. So you can get flare-ups when they come off. So if I have a patient who's on birth control pills, going to come off birth control pills, I really speed up their skincare program to try to avoid that flare-up. And some of the birth control pills are male dominant, and we like those, like orthotricycline or the new one called Yaz. Unfortunately, the OBGYN doctor likes the low estrogen pill, and it takes a high level of estrogen to suppress the testosterone. So we got to use Yaz or orthotricycline. Some of the ones that, like low overall, the low estrogen ones don't work. And they have low estrogen, but they use more progestin, which is sometimes male dominant. So sometimes, with the mild, low dose birth control pills, they'll flare up and have a problem. So not my favorite treatment. I just rather stick with what I know, which is vitamin A and benzoyl peroxide. So remember that you inherited the acne, and some people inherit this type. It takes 90 days for this pore to mature and turn dark. So I had an argument with my professor, Dr. Kligman, on why it turns dark, because one theory was that when the oil comes up, it hits the air, it oxidizes and turns dark. The other thing is that if you look down the pore, there's melanocytes a little bit down the pore, like the first millimeter, so they can make pigment and dump it into these stuck cells and turn it dark. So we don't know whether it's really oxidation or the melanin that turns it dark, but that's the blackhead. So this person is maybe handling it rather well. It takes 90 days for the pore to impact and develop the comedone and then come up and turn black. So they get a little bit of a flare-up, but not bad. Now over here is my case, which is no visible comedones. But remember, in medicine, there's a phrase called the sine qua non, which is the important thing. The disease, for example, in diabetes, the sine qua non is a high blood sugar. In this case, it's comedones. So when we open this little pustule, it has to have a comedone in there. If there's no comedone, it's not acne. It could be a gram-negative folliculitis. It could be too much iodide, too much bromide, other things that aggravate it. So if you open up like 5 pustules and there's no comedone, it probably is not acne. Maybe something else flaring it up. So, but these people, the pores are so bad, you have to excuse my French, but the pores are so shitty that they break out right away. And a little microcomedones becomes a huge pustule. So here's our little mother and son. So they came to our clinic, and I said, why are you here? You have beautiful skin. And then they took off their shirt, and here's all mom's old scars. She had that cystic acne, the scarring of the back, and then the son got it. Acne of the back is difficult because the pore is twice as deep, so the impaction, instead of being like 1 millimeter, is like 2 or 3 millimeters deep. So they're really hard to extract. You really got to push your skincare program. And what I try to teach them is to, when they're in the shower, call their sister or call mom or dad to scrub the back, because they got to scrub all the way down. So remember, it's here, but it's going to be moving like the wave. The wave's going to go on down the back, and they have it all the way down to the belt line. So you have to treat them and have mom give them a good scrub with our benzoyl peroxide scrub cleanser. So remember, we're big believers in the scrub cleanser. We have the benzoyl peroxide that goes down the pore and releases free radical oxygen, which kills everything and opens up the acne impactions. We want to use the benzoyl peroxide, but one of the keys, which has originally been written up in the medical literature, is to leave it on. So you want time for the benzoyl peroxide to go down the pore and kill the bacteria. So the idea is at least to leave it on like 10 minutes. So what I'm trying to teach my patients now is to put it on while they're still studying. And 30 minutes later, take your shower, so it's had a chance to sink in, and then shower it off. So you don't just put it on, shower it off, and watch it all go down the drain. You want to leave the benzoyl peroxide scrub cleanser on as long as you can. to let it penetrate in. So we know it's caused by genetic. We know that, it's not related to the myths, but each one of these myths has a certain grain of truth. So in diet, it's not the chocolate, but it's the sugar in the chocolate bar that can cause a problem. And cleanliness is important because some people use hair pomades and they get it down on the forehead and can flare it up. And then, of course, whenever you're talking about myths, there's always sex. There's either too much, not enough, it's something, always these myths. So remember, grandmother said, oh, he got 23 and he got married and the acne went away. Well, the real truth is he outgrew it at 23. But the sad thing was his wife went on birth control pills and she flared up. So she had a problem for the next 10 years. So remember, the sludging of the dead skin cells is a genetic defect of acne, and that's what causes it. So we did research on the chocolate, and we couldn't make people worse if they just had chocolate. But if they had a high sugar diet, this is recently a research that the high sugar diet is going to flare them up. So we like the low glycemic diet. So the glycemic index was popularized by a doctor in South Beach who wrote the South Beach diet, and we have patients follow that, where they stay on a low sugar. So I don't know, Martha, if we gave them the handout with the South Beach diet. Did we hand that out? No.
I don't think so.
All right. Maybe at lunch we can make that handout, make copies of it,
Yes.
and hand it out for everybody. So we actually hand the patients the low glycemic diet, and of course sugar is up on top, and we tell them you can have anything. I'm sitting there with like a Hispanic teenager, and I'm trying to tell them they can't have sugar. That's tough. So I tell them that you can, down at the bottom are vegetables and fruits. So I say you can have anything that's green, yellow, or red. And they look at me kind of strange and say, I don't eat that. So then I've got to pretend I'm the Jolly Green Giant and tell them they have to have peas. I did that with my daughter when she was 3. When I met her, when I was with Sarah, she wouldn't have peas. So I jumped around the table and I was a Jolly Green Giant, and finally she ate the peas. But also nuts are fine too. So I tell them they carry a bag of almonds in their pocket, and when they need a snack, they have a handful of almonds and stay off of the sugar. So in the sugar index, which we'll make you a copy of, the top thing is the maltose in beer. So I'm looking there at a 16-year-old mother sitting over here, and I say, well, unfortunately, you can't have a 6-pack of beer every night. But normally they don't anyhow. It's just kind of a joke to tell them to stay off of sugar. So they stay off the sugar and they eat, you know, the vegetables and the almonds. Basically, it's the diet we should all be on. So nothing white, no white potato, no white bread, no white sugar, no instant rice. So you don't, nothing instant. It can't be, you know, super refined, because then you get a rush of blood sugar and causes a problem. So down at the bottom or in the middle, I have oatmeal, and I circle it and I say old-fashioned oatmeal. You can't have the instant stuff, so nothing instant. And if you stay on that, you'll avoid one of the aggravating factors. So actually, here's the diet right here. We have it right here. So maltose, that's the beer. So remember, the thing is set up on sugar, which is 100.
Oh, it's here.
And you have it. You have it on the handout, right, right.
But it's small. We'll print you a nice.
Yeah, so and you give it to the patient. So I tell them on the baked potato, you can eat the skin, but you can't have the white. So you give the white to the dog, and you eat the skin. No instant rice. Now I have one patient who believed that she's an opera singer, 16-year-old girl just starting out in singing, and she believed that if she had a jar of honey and she drank honey during her presentation, that it would lubricate the vocal cords and make her voice better. So at the end of the show, the honey was gone, the whole bottle of honey. And also she used MAC makeup before the show, so she had 2 huge aggravating factors, so they get off honey. Carrots doesn't really belong here. It belongs down here. But carrot juice, any kind of a juice, they release the sugar and can be a problem. Watermelon, of course, has high sugar. And so you want to be on the green, yellow, and red, or the almonds. So we try to work on their diet as an aggravating factor. Also, the cleanliness is a problem. Now this particular one here we're showing you is pomade acne. So we have a lot of pomade acne in ethnic skin. So they use Dixie Peach, Royal Crown, Ultra Sheen, and all those contain these irritating products. So what I try to tell them is to make their own hair pomade. They take like Mom's chocolate double boiler and they put in like 50% mineral oil and 50% petrolatum and heat it up in the double boiler. And if they want to make a green color, they take a little bit of green color from the egg dye from RIT and make a little bit of a green color. So they could use like a water-soluble hair conditioner like DEP, or they can use mineral oil or petrolatum, but not these fancy ones that contain all these irritating products. So remember that we have these fatty acids like lauric acid, myristic acid. It's these C10, C12, C14 linked fatty acids that go right down the pore. The really small ones like vinegar, like acetic acid, is too water soluble to go down the pore. And the ones that are super long, like we'll see in shea butter, behenic acid is like C24, too big to go down the pore. But the middle ones go right down the pore. And if we make an ester, isopropyl, out of it, it goes down even more. So this is our big offender, isopropyl myristate. And it's very common in makeup because, and moisturizers, because the cosmetic chemist likes it because it mixes the water and oil really well. So it's used a lot, and also cousins of that are used. It's the same stuff that's in your garage. There's a jar in your garage or a can in your garage called liquid wrench, and your husband puts it on a bolt to eat off the rust. So what it really does is penetrate, and will take the rust and you can do the bolt. So you can actually take isopropyl myristate, a beaker of it, and put it on the lab bench and come back after the weekend, and the stuff's migrated up the top, migrated down the side, and it's all the way on the lab bench because it's so penetrating. Lanolin itself is fine, but the chemist doesn't like it because it's like axle grease. It's super sticky and thick, so they'll add sugar to it. They'll acetylate it, and remember in the glucose molecule there's 3 acetic acids, and they'll take one and make it more water soluble and make it a problem. And some of the red dyes we have to be careful about because they're made from coal tar, and we know coal tar makes acne worse because the chimney sweeps in England all got acne of the scrotum from going up and down the chimney. And so Dr. Ehrlich in Germany was fractionating coal tar, and when he was distilling it off, he found this red color called the DNC red dyes. It's against the law to put the red dyes into the eyeshadows. So what I tell my clients if they want to have a blusher is they go to the cosmetic counter and they go to the eyeshadow line, and they'll find something red. And when they flip it over, it's going to be, say, carmine. And carmine is from the Mexican blister beetle. And it's not a DNC red and doesn't cause acne. So if they use eyeshadow carmine on their cheeks for a little red color, that's fine. You have to be careful here with pomade acne. We're just now redoing our paper on ingredients and focusing on things that will aggravate acne. So Dr. Kligman wanted Dr. Playwig and I, we were the research fellows with Dr. Kligman, and we used to do studies at the Holmesburg prison. So he said, go out and find some good skin so we can put topical steroid on there or 2,4-dioxane and make acne and study it. So we went to the prison and we looked at 900 prisoners. 700 of them had cosmetic acne because in their commissary they had a hair product called Wildroot Cream Oil, and it contains the isopropyl myristate, and they all broke out. So we had a hard time finding good skin for the study. And this is the pomade acne that is typical of Wildroot Cream Oil. This is more typical here of sulfur 8 or Dixie Peach, more inflammatory. But what often happens too is they'll use the hair, like Wildroot Cream Oil on the hair, and they say, oh, it's a super good moisturizer, and they'll put it across their face like that at the end. And here you have typical cosmetic acne from Wildroot Cream Oil. The thing about it, which you want to remember, is we call it monomorphous because acne is pleomorphic. It's got comedones, papules, pustules, cysts, all kinds of different lesions. When you induce it, all follicles are hit at the same time, all follicles mature together, and they end up at 90 days after using the products with the same stage acne. So this is monomorphous acne. So if you see monomorphous acne, something's doing it. It can be hair pomade, it can be a topical steroid, or oral steroid, like the one case that Martha showed you of our little girl, Mackenzie, who was taking prednisone because she had a liver problem. I don't know if you told her story, but interesting story. She went to a doctor to go on Accutane. He drew the blood, we will always do the blood, and we checked the liver because Accutane can affect the liver. So in her case, she had very high enzymes before Accutane, couldn't use Accutane, but it turned out she had a liver problem and bad liver. And she's only like, how old is she, 17, 18, somewhere in there? But they're worried that she may have to have a liver transplant because of the whatever's causing this horrible inflammation. And Dad's very protective of her, and he's worried that she's going to be playing soccer and get hit and all over the liver and rupture the liver and have to have a liver transplant. And you want to, if you're going to have a transplant, you have to stand in line to find one, so you don't want to do it in a rush. So remember monomorphous acne, that's something doing it. And this is our picture, one of my favorite ones, which I want to now do in the book. But here's our normal pore. Here's the cells starting to sludge up in certain families. And there's a little granule in there called a lytic granule. This little granule causes the cells to fall apart at 28 days and fall off. So in the acne biopsies we did, there's no lytic granules. If we put them on vitamin A, it forces the lytic granules back, and there'll be a bunch of these little granules that will cause these cells to fall apart and come on out. So if you just do the normal transition, it takes 90 days. And it doesn't really much do that on its own, but if you're pushing vitamin A and benzoyl peroxide, you'll see these come out. So a patient comes in and they're hard to extract. I mean, they're tough, they're stuck in there. If we get them on the program and we get the pores pushing out new cells, and these new cells don't stick, the whole comedone gets very loose, and you'll see it open up, and extraction becomes a joy. You just take your little extractor and go pop, 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 and they pop out. Where if I'm over here, it's like a battle. And you got to be careful, because if you don't get it out, you can break the wall and force it deeper. So that's why you have to be very, very careful with extraction to make sure they're ready and to gently get these out. Because if you push down on them and not ready, you can rupture it out the other side. Or if they're a picker, they can do it on their own. And when enough white cells come in, they come to the top and it makes a pustule. And the white blood cells have no enzymes to digest this hard keratin. Unfortunately, we don't have an enzyme called keratinase. Whenever I say ACE, it means enzyme. So we have an enzyme, though, comes in from the white blood cells called collagenase. So we can dissolve the collagen around this sucker, and the body's trying to get rid of it. They think that's a foreign body, like a hair stuck in there, or a piece of asphalt if you fell off your motorcycle. So they want to get rid of it. So the white blood cells come in. They can't really affect this. Remember the fungi that I got when I was a teenager, the athlete's foot? I got in the boys' gym. The fungi has keratinase, so it can live in that keratin. So when it's cold, it's inactive. In the hot summer, it says, oh, good, good, the climate's right. So the little fungi will start to grow, and I get my athlete's foot back because it can live in the keratinocytes because it has a keratinase. But we have collagenase, so the body wants to get rid of this foreign impaction, so what it does, it just dissolves all the collagen around it, and out it comes. Unfortunately, it leaves a scar. So the body says, oh good, I got rid of that little foreign body, but leaves the scar. So acne is a scarring process, and the acne in the adult woman, we have to have a discussion about picking and a discussion about extraction. Because if we extract, well, obviously we can't tell them not to extract. We got to teach them. So we teach them that when they're ready, they can gently extract them out. Or if they wait for the pustule, they can get that out. Unfortunately, the real picker will start working on them when they're like the menstrual period, the third week of the menstrual cycle. They'll get the acne of the chin, and they'll start working on it. And I tell them, not pick it, ice it. So I tell them that I give them permission when they're over here at the Don Shula restaurant to get the ice cube out of the ice water and put it on their chin and ice it. So if you ice it right away, it's anti-inflammatory, so it'll help heal that wall right here. It'll help heal that. So in these old acne lesions, you'll see breaks and heals like 10 times. It'll break and heal before it finally comes out. But eventually that comedone has to come out. So acne adult woman with the nodules of the chin, I'll ice it or I'll inject it with hydrocortisone and they'll get better. But then that comedone's still there. So the 3rd week of their next menstrual cycle, it may flare up again. So
How did you ever come up with the ice? I mean, was it just like cold is good for inflammation, or how did you ever come up with ice?
well, there's 2 stories. One story, well, this is the true story. Remember our friend,
Give us the true one.
yeah, the true one first. But remember I was talking about Phyllis Skolnick, who put me on the mineral oil, and when she was my fellow at the lab, she had her first child, and she had a episiotomy scar, episiotomy wound that was sutured up, painful as hell. So she jumped in a bucket of ice, and the pain went away. So that's how we started.
kidding
That's how we started. That's how we started. Phyllis Skolnick and the ice trick. So maybe what we should do is have an apple dipping contest, and they can just put their head into the ice.
You should come up with some kind of a mask or something.
Yeah, the
You
ice.
know? Yeah.
So what I also tell them, which is also true, but I think it's a later on story, was in the old days, the athletes who would bang their knee, they'd put a hot blanket around it. Now they ice it. You'll see in the football, they have ice, and they'll ice that knee. Now they're not going to freeze the joint, but they freeze the skin, and the surface of the skin will have ice crystals. And when it starts to melt, it'll release these anti-inflammatory peptides, and it'll go down to the joint and make it better. So the same thing here, you freeze the skin, and you're going to release these anti-inflammatory peptides, which will put it in favor of healing. So the constant battle here between the epithelium trying to heal and the white blood cells coming in and trying to dissolve it and get rid of it. Same thing happens with tuberculosis. Remember, Professor Koch was doing the Koch postulates, and he knew this bacteria that he got out of tuberculosis caused it, but he had to prove it. So he took his arm and injected the bacillus into his arm, and he got a huge inflammatory nodule, just like this one here, and eventually the whole thing erupted out, and he got a scar where he had done it. Same thing happens in the lung. When you take the tuberculous bacillus and you inhale it, it gets into the lung, the body wants to get rid of it. It can't kill the tuberculosis bacilli because it has a very thick, oily coat, and the white blood cells can't get at it. So what they'll do, they can't kill it. So what they'll do is they'll kill the lung. They'll go in, the white blood cells will activate the collagenase, and you'll spit up this phlegm, and if you x-ray the lung, there'll be a hole in it, and eventually it scars in, and you have a little white scar all over the lungs from tuberculosis. Because the body can't kill the bacteria or it can't kill this impaction, so it kills itself in order to get rid of it. Just a method of survival. So acne comes across the face like a wave and goes onto the back and chest. And you can see here it skipped the neck because there's no sebaceous follicles here, but then goes all the way down to the belt line, and can go down below the belt, especially if they're tropical acne. And we had the people in Vietnam, and they had a hot pack on the back and the hot weather, and we sprayed Agent Orange, which is that 2,4-dioxane, the world's strongest acne agent. We flared them up. And so the most frequent cause of combat troops coming back to San Francisco to go to the hospital was either a wound or acne from tropical acne. Horrible, horrible acne. When I visited the hospital in San Francisco, they had all the veterans there with bad, they weren't veterans, they were actually, you know, Marines at that point, with bad acne of the chest and back. So now we're moving on, acne rosacea, and to me it's a form of acne, but they don't have comedones. I think maybe they do have comedones, but you can't find them. They're very micro comedones, and they'll end up with rosacea stage 1, which is the redness. That's what my wife gets when she drinks a little red wine. She'll flush. So there's aggravating factors. Stress, caffeine, wine, alcohol will cause this flush. So that's the first step of acne rosacea. The second step is these papulopustules, and the third step is in the eye. They get ocular rosacea in the follicle, the meibomian follicles here, which are oil follicles. So remember, the tear has water, but water evaporates really quick. So Mother Nature found out that if we put sebaceous follicles in there and make oil, the oil and water mixture won't evaporate so quick. So there's oil glands there, and they'll get rosacea of the eye. And then the fourth form of rosacea is rhinophyma. Rhinophyma, which is W.C. Fields' nose, a big bulbous nose that builds up. So on rosacea, we want to get rid of the redness, and we're developing like the rosacea kit. So we can't use strong things because the skin's super sensitive in rosacea. So we use like green tea. We can't use the like the glycolic toner or the mandelic toner. So we'll use Totalo, aloe vera. We'll use the green tea and the aloe vera and the Alacort, the hydrocortisone cream during the day, and then at night we'll do something called Rosacea RX. Same thing, green tea, the aloe vera, and then a product called Rosacea RX, which that controls it pretty well. And this is more inflammatory type with a bad flare-up. So they can have, you know, more cystic lesions also, and difficult to treat. But she cleared up. Remember, there's no cure, so if she stops the treatment, it may come back.
I have one client like that.
What are you doing for them?
She just come to me. So I say, wait when I come back.
So we got to give her the rosacea kit. So we know the acne genetic predisposition, it's inherited, autosomal dominant. So, you know, if mom had it, you might get it. So it's autosomal dominant. That means that 3 out of the 4 children will have it, and common. And I'm dealing now with families that grandmother had it, mom had it, now I got the teenagers in with it. So we talked about mechanical occlusion, like the big one today is underwire bra, or the baseball cap, or the violin bow that can aggravate it. Stress, of course, makes any disease worse, even like diabetes gets worse with stress. So 8 hours sleep every night, and I tell you, you got to go to bed at 9 o'clock. And these teenagers, I tell you, I don't know how they do it, but they're up all hours of the night. And you know, so I had a couple of patients who were nurses who worked night shift, and I couldn't get them better. If they're working night shift, forget it. You know, I can't. I got to get them on day shift and get them back onto the normal rhythm, the diurnal rhythm, in order to make it better. We talked about hormones, your favorite cosmetic. We talked a little bit about iodides, and the one case that we have of Sarah who goes across the street from the heat arena and goes to the sushi bar and has the kelp and will flare up from iodides. I also have a religious group in Indiana called The Way, and they have a thing with kelp. They grind it up and they put it in salt shakers, and every meal they'll sprinkle the kelp onto their food, and they all break out. Then we have one patient we're dealing with right now, which we showed you the slide, Mauricio. I'm trying to get him off of lithium. Lithium and dilantin, these mental drugs, can aggravate the follicle and break them out. So sometimes I can get him off of dilantin for epilepsy, sometimes I can't. And so same with lithium. I'm trying to get this kid, he has the bipolar disorder, and he's better on lithium, but I'm trying to get him off, and there's new things now. I'm working with a psychologist trying to get him off of the lithium. And we talked about sunlight can make acne better or worse. There's a section in the book called Majorca Acne, where the secretaries from England in the month of August, when they have this 5-week vacation, go to the island of Majorca and lay there under the sun, and they end up with Majorca acne when they go back home in September, and the German dermatologists call it Majorca acne. We talked about topical or systemic steroids, like our friend Mackenzie, who was on prednisone. The first patient we ever treated with Retin-A was a patient had lupus of the kidney and was on prednisone, and she all broke out. And we didn't know what we were doing. Dr. Kleebman gave us this little brown bottle, and back in those days it was called vitamin A acid, and we gave it to this girl 3 times a day. So imagine an alcohol-based formula of 0.1% vitamin A acid 3 times a day. Oh, we peeled the hell out of her. I got in trouble because we had the faculty going around once a week to check our cases, and she really was peeling, and so they thought I was a little vigorous. Dr. Kleebman was a vigorous guy, and when I trained at the University of Tulane under Dr. Derbies, I spent every summer in dermatology, and he wrote me a nice letter to Dr. Shelley, head of the department at the University of Pennsylvania, and I got in for my internship and residency. But the last words that Dr. Derby said was, "Stay away from that wild man Kligman." So I went up there and I tried to work with Shelley in his lab, but he was like, you know, monomorphous. I couldn't deal with me. He wouldn't really tell me what was going on. So I migrated over to the Kligman camp, and even though he was wild, he was a great teacher. He would teach me dermatology during the week, and on Friday night we would have the journal club, and all the residents from the University of Pennsylvania, from the Navy, they had a Navy unit there, or from Jefferson Hospital, they'd all come to Kligman's lab at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. And you're not supposed to have booze at the university, but he had scotch and he had bourbon and everything, so it was a good journal club. After journal club, I was pretty soused, but we got in Dr. Ackerman's big old black Jaguar, family Jaguar. His dad collected antique cars. We had this big old Jaguar sedan, and Kligman and I would sit in the back and finish off the bottle of Southern Comfort. And by the time we got up to Snow, Vermont to go skiing, Play would throw us into the jacuzzi. And after we'd be in the jacuzzi, then he'd throw us in the snow and beat us with birch branches. It was the German approach to clear skin. But the important thing about Kligman was that he didn't, whatever he was doing, he loved to teach. So he would teach you during the week, dermatology, but on the weekend he'd teach me how to ski down Snow, Vermont, down Snow Mountain. So he was just a great, great teacher. This is the underwire bra, which is adult women as a problem. So we got to get him off that. We got to get him off the anxiety. This is my esthetician with the nodules of the chin, and really flared up, and a lot of stress. We iced her down, but we got rid of the husband and went away.
So is that the answer?
That's the answer. That's the answer. Went away. Good. That's the answer. All right. All right. This is the girl that went to the Mary Kay cosmetic party, and you have to be careful about this word. Dr. Kligman developed this word, non-comedogenic, and everybody uses it now. So, like this line here, ultra performance moisture whip, and there's one in this line here that's no longer available. Basically, a water-based cosmetic that's non-comedogenic. But what these companies will do is they'll test one product, and it tests okay, and then they'll talk about the whole line. And so I tell my patients is to use the cheaper ones because there's more water. If you go to like Macy's, you can get Moisture Whip, or you go to Neiman Marcus, you can get the Ultra Performance. This is like, you know, $100 for a bottle. This is like 70, and our little water-based one, Pore Minimizer, is like 30 at Walgreens. So stay with the ones that have more water. And this word here is misused. So, like I say, they test one product, and they tested. Dr. Kligman and I tested everything on the rabbit ear, because the rabbit ear is very sensitive, and in 2 weeks you can get acne in the rabbit ear from these ingredients. But nowadays rabbits are not popular, so we use the backs of volunteers. So you put on the makeup on the back for like 2 weeks, and nothing happens, and you say non-comedogenic, you did the test. It doesn't mean anything, because it takes 6 months on human skin to get acne, where we can do it in less than 2 weeks with the rabbit ear. So this word doesn't mean much anymore. You just got to read the ingredient deck and stay away from the irritants. And also you got to be careful about the commercial products. This is when Dr. Kligman and I developed Retin-A, we did the alcohol-based formula, which is now what's called Retin-A gel. But J&J bought it, and they had a company, a subsidiary in Germany called Janssen Pharmaceuticals, and they had a cream moisturizer. They put the vitamin A into the cream, and it's 30% isopropyl myristate. So if they are using this cream, and they're using a benzoyl peroxide, this one here is by Westwood, they wanted to make it more irritating, so I don't know why. I mean, benzoyl peroxide irritates by itself. But they put something there called Laureth-4, which is that lauric acid, remember? And they put 4 sugars on there that make, and with a couple of sugars, it goes right down the pore. If you have Laureth-10 or Laureth-20, there's too many sugars, it won't go down the pore. But you got to be very careful, because with the isopropyl myristate in the morning, the benzoyl peroxide and Loreth-4 at night, no way she's going to get better. So I have a whole bunch of these products in my lab, stacked up there, things that we used to have a basket in the clinic where they put the junk cosmetics, just throw them in there. And so we have all those left over. But they have to be off of those irritants. But moving ahead, we want to do our clear complexion program. So low glycemic diet, use their cleanser and their toner. The progressive peel we're going to show you this afternoon. And then a few cases have to have Accutane, but now we use like Mycilized A. So we'll go to Mycil A first, and then if we have to, go to Accutane. But I would say like of 100 patients, only 2 or 3 end up on Accutane. This is the story of vitamin A. Vitamin A has its own receptor. So vitamin A is the vitamin for skin. It has its own receptor. So when you eat a carrot, you eat beta carotene, it gets broken down in the gut, split in half, and gets into the blood, and is transported there as retinol. And when it gets to the eye changes it to retin A aldehyde, which is for night blindness. When it gets to the skin changes it to retinoic acid, which has a receptor which takes it into the cell, and it does 2 things. It makes new cells that don't stick, and it also reduces something called metalloproteases. Metalloproteases are a fancy name for collagenase and elastase. So, we know when you get inflammation, you activate those and you digest the skin. So vitamin A is ideal because it makes new cells that don't stick, and it also shuts down the collagenase. So the idea is more for the fibroblasts in the dermis. It wants to get rid of the wrinkles, get rid of the anti-aging. So it'll kick off new cells, suppress the enzyme that dissolves them, and you get new collagen, you get new elastic fibers, and the wrinkles go away. So remember, Dr. Kligman and I and Dr. Playwig put the vitamin A on, peeled the hell out of these teenagers. But a lot of our adult women kept on it, and their fine lines went away. And when Dr. Kligman had a press conference at the University of Michigan with Dr. Voorhees, who was a good researcher in vitamin A metabolism, he, I don't know how Dr. Voorhees did it, but he had the 20 women in Michigan for all year round put on the vitamin A acid 0.1%. I don't know how he did it in the middle of winter in Michigan. But anyhow, they did it, and all the lines went away. When they had the press conference and they showed the pictures of these lines gone, all of a sudden, the sales of retin A, which didn't do a whole lot for J&J for acne, but that press release the next day went to 300 million. And you couldn't buy retin A in the US. I had to go to Mexico to get it because the sales went up. It shows you the power of the adult woman acne aging market. So we use it for everything. We use the vitamin A in our melasma program to get off the dead skin cells. We use it for acne to release the impacted pores, and we use it for the photoaging to puff out the fine lines. So it was a big breakthrough. When I was having a cocktail with Dr. Peter Hildig-Smith, one of the board of directors at J&J, I was in Colonel Johnson's library in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and the doctor came up to me and says, "What you've done is not important for vitamin A, it's important for the sciences of retinoids." Well, I never heard of the word retinoid, but now it's all over the place. They have retinoids for cancer, retinoids for everything. But it developed out of Dr. Kligman's read in the German literature. There was a big chart in German literature about things that have thick skin and how it thins the skin down, whether it's ichthyosis or psoriasis, and at the bottom was acne. So he brought over the vitamin A acid from Hoffmann La Roche and made up the solution. We put it on. He put me on a train from Philadelphia to New Brunswick. I got off and met Peter Hildig-Smith, showed him all the pictures. J&J bought it. University of Miami made $48 million in royalties, and I got an attaboy. Attaboy, attaboy, keep on going. So that's the story of my life. I'm still attaboy. All right, so the important thing is it releases the impactions, and you can see the old impaction right here and the new cells that don't stick with the vitamin A. And, oh, sorry, let's go back the other way. Here's this girl only had retin A, only had vitamin A, and we cleared her up. The important thing to remember, though, is we have the mountains here from acne. There's also valleys. So point out to them that there's some scarring from their old acne, and that becomes visible when you clear up their skin. So they'll say, oh, look at the scars. Well, you need to tell them ahead of time there's the acne scars, and it's not you that did it, but it's the old white blood cells that flow in there to get rid of that impaction. So here I can extract out that impaction, but some of these aren't ready. They're just like nodules, and we have to ice them. Or in our clinic, we'll inject them with the Ristispan. And here is all the closed comedones here. This is a very common area. And Sam is helping me with my research. Sam in the room? Oh, there she is over there. And what we're looking at is these areas are very oily and will impact. Over here, not so much. So we're studying the areas that are really oily. And they also doing cultures to see the Corynebacterium acnes, and so we're doing research on that. Here's benzoyl peroxide. Remember that if you go to the auto shop and you buy the liquid putty to fix a dent in your car, they give you this putty, and they give you a little tube on top, and it's benzoyl peroxide, because benzoyl peroxide will activate the resin and make that a dent. You can fill the dent with the fiberglass from the resin and the benzoyl peroxide. So it's used in industry. You have to be careful because very concentrated benzoyl peroxide is explosive. One of the companies that was first into it, Texas Pharmacal in San Antonio, Texas, they had a semi full of benzoyl peroxide, exploded. So they have an explosion-proof lab or room where they make the benzoyl peroxide. So we water it down. So I can only buy benzoyl peroxide 80% now because it's watered down. I have to be very careful when I mix it, because if you get it too hot, it'll explode. So now we have one called Curoxal where they've already ground it up and it comes as a liquid. Maybe later on, Sam, you could, or Fatima, you could show them our Curoxal bottle, and you can see it all ground up. So we buy it now ground up. It's much easier to use. We just make our detergents, we add the benzoyl peroxide to it, and pretty much it's done. In the old days, we had to put it through a grinder to grind up the particles of benzoyl peroxide, and we had to make sure we had it diluted in water or it would explode. But nowadays, it's much easier to do. And this is a case, now we use our vitamin A, our mandelic toner, and our benzoyl peroxide, and our vitamin A. So this is ethnic, and every time you get an inflammatory lesion, it's going to turn dark. So we want to get the acne under control to get rid of the dark spots. And they'll come to you and say, I got these dark spots there, that they're always there. Well, the dark spot will come and go, but since they have new acne, they'll get new dark spots. So the key is to really clear up the acne, and then we put them on like the Even Color program to get rid of the dark spots. Extraction, we'll show you that this afternoon, I hope, but you have to learn how to do it. So we dilate the pore with our little extractor. Here we're using a finger stick, but our extractor now has a needle on one end and a loop on the other. So we can dilate the pore. You're actually not going into the skin, you're just dilating the pore. And you want to make sure that you get out the comedone. And I have some patients that have 3 comedones in one. So I'll extract it, and we call it two-step extraction, because in 5 minutes you're supposed to go back to the other side and check it again. So then it has a chance to swell up, and you put your fingers on it with gloves and check it again, and out will come the second or the third impaction. It's all one comedone, but it comes out in sections. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I got to make sure I get it all out. So I get this out, I say, ooh, good, I got rid of it, but I leave that in, it'll flare up again. So once we have it all out, that pore will never get hit again. That pore is finished. It'll move on to the next one, but never go back. So it always faces, it's always moving laterally, going out. So I want to talk about the peels. I'm not going to show up any slides on that now because this afternoon we're going to do the progressive peel. So Sarah and I wanted to devise a peel that estheticians could do that was really good, but didn't, it was slow and didn't get them too blanched out. So the number one is a solution called Yesner, which is a mixture of lactic acid, salicylic acid, and we took the resorcinol out and put in citric acid because some people get allergic to the resorcinol, and many of these patients are getting 3, 4, or 5 peels, and they may get allergic to the resorcinol. So classic Yesner has resorcinol, but the modified Yesner is taken out and put citric acid in. Then we do a low strength of TCA, a higher strength of TCA, and we always end up with the vitamin A propionate, 10% vitamin A at the end. which makes the peel more uniform, and you leave it on as long as possible. So we try to leave them on, like if we do it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we tell them you can't take it off until 10 o'clock at night. The problem is, if they go to the disco where they have the flashing disco lights, they'll light up all yellow, man. They'll look yellow from the peel. And we always have a solution of eye wash handy in case we happen to get it into the eye, and we just flush out the eye. And then we use 3x3s because 4x4s are too big and wasted 2x2s are too small. And then around the eyes, we'll use like a Q-tip around the eyes. This is acne, but also, normally I'll skip the eye on an acne patient, but if they're older and have fine lines, I'll also peel around the eyes. This is just patients that have really gone through the whole program and have cleared up. This is a mixture of acne and bad melasma, and we're able to get her better. But remember, melasma is, inherits it also, and it's another Spanish gene. So Olga, our nurse, can't be here today, but she's from Colombia, and 80% of the Colombian women who've had children have melasma. So it's a Spanish gene, comes on with pregnancy with a high dose, a high level of estrogen, brings out these defective melanocytes. So remember, we have estrogen melanocytes, melanocytes with estrogen receptors, because during pregnancy, you'll see the nipple get dark. You'll see the linea alba here turn dark. That's normal. But these people have inherited these funny melanocytes in funny areas, and they have estrogen receptors, so they'll turn dark. So even though we get them light, the next pregnancy, they're going to turn dark again, or with birth control pills, they're going to get dark, or even with sun exposure. I have, normally it's in women, I have a few male patients, so I have one guy who's electrician, but he goes up on the roof and he gets too much sun and he'll get his melasma flared up. This is Sylvia. She was a receptionist at the Miami Children's Hospital, and I was going into Children's to see the orthopedist there for my bad back, and she was sitting there at the counter, and my wife nudged me and said, give her a card. So we gave her a card, and she showed up, and she's Sylvia, and we really put her on our program before Accutane. We just put her on a really good program and got her cleared up. This is Accutane here. Remember, that's the chemist at Hoffman LaRoche got jealous with Dr. Kligman because he was buying all this vitamin A acid. So what the chemists did at Hoffman LaRoche is they rotated the molecule and made cis vitamin A, and it tricks the follicle. So the follicle will take in the vitamin A, think it's real stuff, but it'll block the binding sites, so the real vitamin A can't get in, and the oil production will fall off. So if you have a patient with acne and they have really oily skin, they got to wash their head every day. If you put them on Accutane or that micellized A, they have to only wash like once a week because it shuts down the oil glands. So it tricks the oil, the sebaceous follicle, and blocks it so the oil production falls off, and basically they become pre-adolescent and they won't flare up. So the oil drops off. The oil will come back after you stop the Accutane. And I have some patients who want to go on a second course of Accutane or a third course or a fourth course of Accutane, not because they're acne, but because they're oily scalp. They want to just shampoo once a week and not worry about it every day. So I can't put them on Accutane for that because it's not indicated. But often the acne will get better and better. Even though they stop the drug, the acne will get better. But we have a few cases like maybe I would say 20% of our patients who flare up a little bit when they come off Accutane, and we got to get them back on the skincare program. And a few patients go on a second or third course of Accutane. Accutane has a lot of side effects. Your hair will fall out, your nails fall off, you get dry skin. 7 days after you start Accutane, you get dry lips. So we have a product called Petricort, which we use hydrocortisone and shea butter to use for the lip when they really get super dry. So dry skin, dry lips, the hair falls out, they get migraine headaches, they get long bone pain. So I can't use it on athletes. But in football season, they go on Accutane, they get muscle cramps, and they can't play football. So I have to do it on the off season. Occasionally they'll need like a repeat course. So this is our friend Sylvia. We showed her before picture. This is her after picture. When I think she ended up on the skincare program plus Accutane, and she got cleared up. This is another patient who went on the Accutane after we got her on the regular skincare program, and she cleared up. So this is just kind of my ending slide. just showing that they have to peel. So here we have, you know, some bad papulopustules, and she's really a good patient. She's peeling around the mouth. Nowadays I put mineral oil here, a little tube of mineral oil, and we got her cleared up, and she did really well. This is a patient who was a school teacher in Tampa who came to me too late, Spanish acne, and had bad scarring, so I had to do a dermabrasion. I try to avoid dermabrasions nowadays because of hepatitis C and also HIV. So the blood's all over the room, and when we do the sanding, so we try to get them under control, and we do like maybe a localized area of sanding, but not the full face. So we'll do that pro peel on the whole face, and then just sand here in the middle to improve the acne valleys. But no matter how good you are with a dermabrader, it's not 100%. So the best improvement I can get is 60 or 70%. They still have valleys. So I fill the valleys with our little filler to try to improve it. But the best thing about acne is to start the treatment when you're 12 and avoid the scars. So in conclusion, we talked about no free radicals, stay away from the sugar, doing their daily skincare program. Then we do, you know, their extractions, and then we do a lot of glycolic microdermabrasions. So that's one thing that Martha does. Do you do glycolic or mandelic?
Mandelic.
Mandelic?
Mandelic is my favorite.
Yeah. The alpha hydroxy is glycolic is 2 carbons, and it penetrates through the skin really quick. So you got to be careful with glycolic, because if you have darker skin and you're doing the glycolic, you can irritate it and get reactive hyperpigmentation. When you have lactic acid, which is just 1 carbon more, the lactic acid from milk, you have the glycolic from sugarcane, which is 2 carbons. You add 1 more carbon, make it lactic acid, much safer. Goes through the skin much slower. In our case, mandelic acid, we have the glycolic plus a phenol, which is a big benzene ring with the phenol that makes it antibacterial. But it's so big that it's safe to use. So we'll use like a 30% peel, and we won't even take it off. We'll just put it on, then come back and do the microdermabrasion on top of it, and it works really well. The glycolic the mandelic will help open up the impactions and also increase the blood flow, so get more tissue turgor for doing our microdermabrasions. And then we'll add the peels and maybe Accutane in a few cases. So anyhow, thank you very much. Time for lunch.
Thank you.
All right. And you heard all my stories about, you know, getting beat with the birch branches and all my favorite stories.